The snow never stopped on the frontier world of Karos 9. It fell day and night, slow and silent, covering everything in white until the land looked empty and endless. The sky stayed gray, heavy with clouds that blocked the distant star. The cold was not just uncomfortable, it was cruel. It crept into bones, slowed thoughts, and stole hope little by little. A group of refugees huddled near the broken remains of an old landing platform. They were not human. Their bodies were tall but thin, their skin pale and slightly blue, made for warm and gentle worlds, not places like this. Long ago, they had been farmers, teachers, builders. Now they were only survivors, trying to stay alive one more hour at a time. Their supplies were gone. Their power cells were empty. The last emergency beacon had failed days ago. Every breath they took formed a weak cloud of mist that disappeared into the wind. They had been promised rescue. Weeks earlier, the Galactic Council had ordered their evacuation after a trade conflict turned violent. Their home system was declared unstable. Ships came quickly, loading citizens in great numbers, but there were not enough seats. Someone had to be left behind. Karos 9 was supposed to be temporary, a stop, a waiting place. Then the war moved on, the treaties changed, and the refugees became a problem no one wanted to remember. From orbit, the planet showed no value, no rare metals, no strategic position, just ice, stone, and storms. The Council marked the system as resolved and moved on. On the surface, the refugees waited. Elder Thesrin stood at the edge of the group, leaning on a metal staff that once held a power core. His hands trembled not from age, but from the cold that never left him anymore. He looked over his people, children wrapped in torn thermal sheets, adults sitting close together to share warmth, eyes dull with exhaustion. They had stopped crying days ago. "Any signal?" a young one asked softly. Thesrin shook his head. "Nothing." The child nodded and said no more. Silence saved energy. Above them, unseen, a small human exploration vessel slipped out of faster-than-light travel. Its name was Horizon's Wake, an old ship by modern standards, with patched hull plates and engines that made strange noises when pushed too hard. Captain Elias Warren leaned forward in his command chair as the sensor officer spoke. "Picking up weak life signs on Karos 9, she said. "Multiple individuals, non-human." The bridge grew quiet. The navigator frowned. "That system is marked empty. Council cleared it months ago." Elias tapped the armrest, eyes fixed on the data scrolling before him. Temperature readings were dangerously low. Storm activity was high. "How long can they survive down there?" he asked. The medical officer answered without looking up. "Based on their biology, hours, maybe less." A pause followed. Then the communications officer spoke carefully. "Captain, Council protocols say non-interference. Those refugees were part of a resolved situation." Elias leaned back slowly. He had heard those words before. Resolved situation, clean and simple, like closing a file. "Resolved for who?" he asked quietly. No one answered. The ship's AI displayed a warning message, calm and neutral. Diverting course would place them behind schedule. Fuel reserves were limited. There was no official rescue authorization. Elias stood. "We're going down," he said. The navigator looked up sharply. "Sir, command will not like this." Elias nodded. "I know." The ship changed course, engines burning against the cold vacuum. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, the hull shook under the pressure of ice winds and falling snow. On the surface, the refugees saw the first sign of hope they had felt in days, a distant light in the sky growing brighter. Some fell to their knees, unsure if it was real. Thesrin's eyes widened. "A ship," he whispered. The wind howled louder as the vessel descended, landing not far from the broken platform. Snow exploded outward as the engines powered down. A ramp lowered. Warm light spilled out into the storm. The refugees did not move at first. Fear and hope battled inside them. Too many times before, hope had hurt more than the cold. Then a figure appeared at the top of the ramp. Human, medium height, broad shoulders, wrapped in a heavy coat not meant for this kind of cold. His face was pale from the wind, his breath visible as he stepped forward. The storm pushed against him immediately. Snow cut at his face. He staggered but kept moving. Thesrin raised his staff slightly. "Stay back," he warned his people, though his voice lacked strength. The human stopped a short distance away. Slowly, carefully, he raised both empty hands to show he carried no weapon. "My name is Elias," he called out, voice rough from the cold. "We detected you from orbit." No answer came at first. Elias took another step forward. His boots sank deep into the snow. He could feel the cold seeping through his layers, biting hard. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "We're here to help." A murmur spread through the refugees. Help was a dangerous word. Thesrin stepped forward, leaning heavily on his staff. "Why?" he asked. "Why come here?" Elias hesitated. He could have spoken of duty or law or curiosity. Instead, he said the truth. "Because you're here," he said simply, "and because no one should be left like this." The wind screamed between them. Elias' fingers burned with cold inside his gloves. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled one glove off. Gasps rose from the refugees as he exposed his bare hand to the storm. Elias extended it toward Thesrin. "Come inside," he said. "It's warmer. We'll figure out the rest together." The cold hit him immediately, sharp and painful. His hand went red, then numb. Every instinct told him this was a mistake. Thesrin stared at the hand. No one had touched him in days. Touch meant warmth. Touch meant trust. Behind him, a child whimpered as the wind grew stronger. Snow fell heavier now, thick and blinding. Elias' legs began to shake. The cold was stealing his strength faster than he expected. "Captain," a voice crackled faintly from a communicator at his collar. "Your body temperature is dropping. Please return." Elias ignored it. Thesrin reached out slowly, his long fingers trembling. When their hands met, the difference in warmth was shocking. Elias sucked in a breath as the last feeling in his fingers vanished. For a moment, neither moved. Then a sudden gust of wind slammed into Elias, knocking him to one knee. The storm worsened without warning, white walls closing in around them. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. "Captain," came the urgent voice again. Elias tried to stand, but his legs would not respond. The cold had moved too deep, too fast. Thesrin felt the human's weight pull against him. Instinct overrode fear. "Help him!" Thesrin shouted. The refugees rushed forward. Together they lifted Elias, surprised by how heavy he was, how solid. They carried him toward the open ramp, snow piling against their legs. Inside the ship, warmth rushed out like a living thing. The moment Elias crossed the threshold, his crew grabbed him, pulling him fully inside. The ramp closed behind them, sealing out the storm. Elias collapsed onto the floor, shivering violently, teeth chattering. The medical officer knelt beside him. "You're an idiot," she said softly as she wrapped him in thermal blankets. Elias managed a weak smile. "Did it work?" She looked past him. The refugees stood just inside the cargo bay, eyes wide, staring at the lights, the warmth, the metal walls that felt like safety. Some began to cry silently, unable to stop themselves. Thesrin looked down at his hand, still tingling from the touch. "Yes," he said quietly. It worked. Outside, the storm raged on, uncaring. Inside the human ship, the first spark of hope in weeks began to grow, but the cold had not finished testing them yet. Far above the planet, long-range sensors quietly logged the ship's unauthorized descent. And elsewhere in the galaxy, eyes began to turn toward Karos 9 once more. Warmth felt strange to the refugees at first. It pressed against their skin, gentle but unfamiliar, like a memory they were afraid to trust. The inside of the human ship was small, crowded, and old, but to them it felt like a palace. Lights glowed softly along the walls. The floor was solid and dry, no wind, no snow. Elias lay on a medical cot wrapped in thick thermal blankets. His body shook as heat slowly returned to him. The medical officer monitored his readings, her face tight with worry. "You were minutes away," she said quietly. Elias opened his eyes. His vision was blurry, but he could still see the refugees standing nearby, unsure where to sit or how to stand. Children clung to their elders. Their eyes followed every movement the humans made. "Are they all inside?" Elias asked. "Yes," the medical officer replied. "Every last one." Elias closed his eyes again, relief washing over him stronger than the heat. The crew moved quickly. Spare blankets were handed out. Warm, nutrient drinks were prepared, adjusted carefully for non-human biology. Engineers opened storage compartments, pulling out emergency heaters that had not been used in years. The refugees accepted everything slowly, carefully, as if it might disappear if they moved too fast. Thesrin sat near the wall, staff resting across his knees. He watched the humans work. There was no panic in them, only focus. They spoke calmly, even as alarms quietly warned about fuel levels and system strain. He had seen powerful species before. He had seen advanced technology. But he had never seen this kind of determination for strangers. One of the human crew, a young woman with tired eyes, approached him and offered a small container. "Warm broth," she said gently. "It will help." Thesrin took it with both hands. The heat seeped into his palms. He nodded in thanks and took a careful sip. The taste was simple, but it made his chest tighten with emotion. "How long were you waiting?" she asked softly. Thesrin thought for a moment. "Long enough to forget how many days passed." She swallowed and said nothing more. Hours passed as the storm outside continued to scream against the hull. The ship's systems worked harder to maintain internal heat. Power levels dropped steadily. In the cockpit, the navigator turned to Elias, who had managed to sit up. "Captain, we can't stay long," he said. "Fuel reserves are low, and command will have questions." Elias nodded. He had known this would not be easy. "Can we lift off with everyone on board?" he asked. The engineer shook his head. "Not safely. The ship was not built for this many passengers." Elias stared at the display, thinking. "Then we don't lift off yet," he said. The crew looked at him. "We stabilize them first," Elias continued. "We make shelter, we wait out the storm." "Command will not approve," the communications officer warned. Elias met her gaze. "Then they can be angry later." Outside, the storm worsened. Snow buried the landing platform completely. Ice formed thick layers along the ship's hull. Inside, humans and refugees worked together. Broken cargo containers were turned into insulated shelters near the ship. Emergency heaters were placed inside, powered by rerouted systems. Human engineers showed refugees how to reinforce walls using debris and ice blocks packed tightly together. It was slow, exhausting work. The cold did not care about courage. Several humans suffered frostbite. One collapsed from exhaustion and had to be carried back inside. Still, no one stopped. From orbit, distant observation satellites watched. Data streamed back to the Galactic Council. Analysts expected failure. "Human ship operating beyond limits," one observer noted. "Crew exposed to extreme conditions, probability of survival low." "Why do they continue?" another asked. There was no clear answer. On the surface, a temporary settlement took shape. It was ugly, uneven, and fragile, but it stood. Thesrin walked through the shelters, leaning less heavily on his staff now. He saw children sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. He saw elders sharing quiet conversations instead of silence. He found Elias outside, tightening a seal on one of the shelters. Snow clung to his coat, his beard covered in frost. "You should be resting," Thesrin said. Elias smiled weakly. "Later." Thesrin watched him work. "You risked much for us." Elias shrugged. "Seemed like the right thing." "For humans, perhaps," Thesrin said. "For the galaxy, this is unusual." Elias paused. He looked out at the white horizon. "My people learned something a long time ago," he said. "Cold doesn't care who you are, neither does space. If we only help when it's easy, we won't last very long." Thesrin considered this. Days passed. The storm finally began to weaken. The sky lightened and the wind softened. The settlement held. When rescue fleets arrived at last, they were stunned. Instead of frozen bodies, they found smoke rising from shelter vents. Heat signatures showed life, many lives. Humans stood watch outside, tired but unbroken. Council representatives demanded explanations. Elias provided them calmly. "You violated protocol," one official said sharply. Elias nodded. "Yes." "You endangered your crew." "Yes." Silence followed. Thesrin stepped forward then, standing tall despite his thin frame. "These humans saved us," he said clearly. "When the galaxy turned away, they reached out." His words were recorded. Broadcast, shared, across the stars the story spread. Humans were not the strongest. Not the fastest, not the most advanced. But when the cold came, they stayed, and the galaxy remembered.